Hey everyone! Today's video is something I have personally noticed happening a lot in K-pop, but honestly, no one has really talked about it, so I thought I will. I'm gonna name this the BTS Syndrome, so yeah, let's just get into it because I'm kind of very excited to share my views on this. So, what is the BTS Syndrome? Is it when you can't resist smacking your homie's ass every time you see it? Close, but no. As we are all aware, some very painfully, BTS are one of the biggest acts in the world and the biggest K-pop act. Now, if you're still having some issues accepting that, it might be because of a slight language barrier. See, there are these two languages that people often mix up because they seem quite similar at first, but they're actually incredibly different, and their names are facts and trash. So actually, a lot of you are going around talking trash, but believing it to be facts. So yeah, I suggest you become more acquainted with facts by watching this channel, and you can do that by subscribing. Anyway, that was a long-winded way of saying BTS are obviously incredibly successful today, but they weren't always like that. We all know BTS's underdog story, a true coming of age, rags to riches, and there's a reason why that story is appealing. As much as we all love BTS for their talents and hard work, there is something very satisfying to see someone rise from the absolute bottom. So it's safe to say that to see an underdog not only come up on top, but actually demolish the competition that tried to hold them back is very satisfying. It is that feeling of having someone you relate to, someone you know has been through similar downs, maybe even worse, is now eating the rich for breakfast. You know they'll appreciate the top because they didn't just climb up a few stairs, they went hiking. Now don't worry, I won't go too much into the way big companies have tried to sabotage and continue to try to push BTS down. Whether it be in K-pop or the international industry, I'll try to keep myself calm. Whether it be with false claims, unfair snubs, media play, lack of coverage when it comes to accomplishments, but an abundance when it comes to fake gossip. Yeah, I'm just gonna keep that to myself for today. That's why it makes sense that BTS's story is heartwarming, and people who put aside their prejudice and actually find this hard past will inevitably be drawn to them. Besides their talent, of course, their perseverance is actually a huge part of their appeal, which is why a lot of Korea's general public feel a sense of pride and protectiveness over the boys. Their humble beginnings and even humbler attitude even today resonates very deeply. Now, here is where the problem with the BTS syndrome arrives. Knowing all of that, it is no surprise that some fandoms want the same for their favorite groups, which sometimes becomes laughable, especially when this is coming from Big Three stans or hype after BTS stans. And this is what I'm calling the BTS syndrome. Wanting your own faves to suffer just so you can say they had this satisfying rise, not understanding that wanting someone to suffer, especially if they're your own favorite idols, is actually pretty stupid. Just to clarify, we don't appreciate the fact that BTS suffered. No one wants that. We just acknowledge and appreciate how they rose above it all. And of course, by suffering, I don't mean suffer in their personal lives, because I am no one to know what's going on in any of these groups or idols' personal lives, and honestly comparing that is really low. I mean suffer as in have a harder time reaching the top in their respective industries. The BTS syndrome is also not about mistreatment such as horrible companies forcing you into horrible decisions or micromanaging you. It's merely about the ease to get to the top. Now let us get to some examples. But I do want you all to keep in mind I have no problems with the groups themselves. They don't tend to say this themselves, it is the fans. It's actually only some of the fans. And sadly, I do have to give examples so you can understand what I mean. But again, these groups have never implied this themselves, just their deranged fans. Beginning with Stray Kids. A lot of stays insist that Stray Kids organically came from the very bottom to the top. And no offense to any members, because no doubt they all worked really hard. They are under JYP, aka Big 3 JYP, aka Wonder Girls Got 7 twice JYP. I'm not saying that they don't make their own music or don't work hard or don't deserve their fame. In fact, that doesn't apply to anyone who enjoys the Big Four privilege. But acting like Stray Kids were some unknown group who had to scrape their way to the top is like saying every other group. This huge list right here started from the very bottom, which is just not accurate. There is a difference between idols being self-made and groups being self-made. I would argue that every idol is self-made, considering they got into the trainee process, worked to make the final lineup. But self-made groups means you start with minimal to no resources, but as we know, once you reach the lineup of a big company's new group, you have tons, and I mean a huge amount of connections, resources, and opportunities. You have huge companies ready to make you the face of their brand, model for them, be in commercials for them, perform at notable festivals, conventions, music shows, and then be highlighted in them, get invited and be allowed significant screen time on major variety shows, get to meet and subsequently get shouted out by the huge senior artists you share your company with, get marketed the hell out of, and have the means to wear designer clothes for your debut stage and then be able to set trends because of it. Stand in front of the music show end stages and then not have to worry about cutting your already short songs in half and then perform them when the arena is either half empty or after the show is over. So trust me when I say it is very likely that your fave groups are absolutely not quote self-made. It doesn't necessarily mean they worked less hard, although that could be the case for some. It just means they had a ski lift to the top of the mountain. Meanwhile, groups from smaller companies have to rely on a hitchhike, which would be a viral song, or just manually hike to the top, and not all groups manage to do that. Some get lost on the way or drop down to their disbandment. Now let's briefly talk about TXT. Some TXT fans truly believe they didn't benefit too much from BTS, while many obviously accept the impact BTS had in TXT's success after debut. They believe it to be close to none because apparently TXT as trainees had to face similar harsh conditions like bad practice areas and dorms. And I do understand your point. Research shows that the first member of TXT to join Big Hit was Yeonjun, according to, wait for it, TXT Amino, and that was early 2015. And while I do agree that Big Hit was still really going through it at the time, and I would definitely acknowledge the harsh conditions mostly Yeonjun, but also the other members had to go through, I will also say just being in a harsh condition doesn't necessarily make you self-made. If that was the case, I would be self-made in high school. Am I right? Again, I do believe all trainees are self-made, therefore all of TXT individually are self-made. They made themselves trainees because of their talent and hard works and got to the debut lineup because of their blood, sweat, and tears. The BTS syndrome applies here because while you did face harsh conditions, it's not that you personally overcame it. It kind of happened because your seniors or BTS kind of really worked their asses off, and by the time you debuted, most of these situations had been ironed out. Again, the BTS syndrome is not the suffering Olympics. I'm not saying they matter more because they suffered more. It's just funny to see so many people hating on BTS every chance they get. But when it comes to their journey, it's obviously so inspiring that you want to go ahead and apply that to your own favorite groups. So at the end of the day, do you just hate BTS or hate that your faves aren't BTS? My intention is never to diminish anyone else's hard work, although that does seem like what a lot of you do to BTS. I just find it fascinating how this phenomenon of rags to riches, or the BTS syndrome, has become a trend that fans use to flaunt their faves with, when it mostly doesn't even apply to a vast majority of them, which subsequently just establishes the fact that you want your faves to be BTS, but some of you still hate BTS, but you still want your faves to be them. That's kind of weird. In the end, I guess it's about respect. If you're taking this phenomenon from BTS and then trying to badly drape that onto your own faves, the least you can do is respect BTS, even just a little. But you'd rather bring up insignificant little trophies they might have won in 2014 as if that disproves their struggle, only to turn around and say your faves from SM had it rougher on the path to fame. And Stray Kids and TXT fans are definitely not the only ones that imply this. For some reason, New Jeans stans, which might be the most delusional take of the bunch, Blackpink fans, and the funniest is probably Once's. And of course, BTS are not the only groups who've done this. They're obviously just the most obvious answer because they're at the very top right now. But there are other groups and artists who are now fairly well known but had less than humble beginnings. I know ATEEZ comes to mind. And while I will agree in some aspects they were held back because of how small KQ is, I don't think they'd be my ideal example merely because their companies seem to be smart and financially stable when setting them up, which led them to get a lot of opportunities that otherwise they wouldn't be able to get. So I guess there are a lot of intricacies to this, and obviously this is again not a who suffered more contest. This is just to reiterate how this storyline of rags to riches is so sought after merely because it's something that is sort of related to BTS's past. But you'll never respect them. Just steal every single thing about them and everything they do and everything their fans do. Right? And obviously this is not that serious of a thing, so if you're about to comment, it was never that serious, I know, but I mean it does matter a little because why else would you choose to watch this video? And with all of that, my loves, I will leave you to ponder on this very new phenomenon that I have discovered, and I'll see you soon once I find myself some sort of flotation device that can save me from drowning in all of these final assignments. Take care and subscribe!